Hi everybody! In today's video we are going to take a look at the 2021 Standard Level Biology Final Exam paper. The first exercise was about plants in the forest. In addition to pine trees belonging to gymnosperms, firs and mosses are also the inhabitants of pine forests. Compare the three groups of plants. Write the number of the statements in the appropriate places of the Venn diagram. Okay, so let's look at the statements. They have thallus organization. We know that mosses are non-vascular, they don't have real tissues, and they have thallus organization, so number one comes here. In order for their gametes to meet, there is no need for water. Water-independent reproduction is present from gymnosperms. Both bryophytes, so mosses and ferns, have water-dependent reproduction, so number two belongs to this category. The dispersal of their seeds is assisted by their fruits. This would be true for angiosperms, but there is no option like that. Therefore, number three comes here. The outside surface of the plant leaves is covered by epidermis. Okay, we have just discussed that mosses don't have so complex structures like vascular plants. So the ferns and the pines have this characteristical feature. Their cells are surrounded by cell walls. Number five is true for all. Obviously, all of them are made up of plant cells. Their organs and tissues help them to adapt to life on land. That is true for ferns and pines, but not for the mosses. They have green chloroplasts. Obviously, all of them have green chloroplasts. They are vascular plants. We have just mentioned that ferns and pines are the vascular ones. They are flowerless plants. Basically, that's true for the ferns and the mosses. So number 9 comes to this intersection. Cutting down pine forests in the drainage basin of our rivers increases the risk of floods. Explain how the two things are connected. So basically we need to explain here how deforestation is making flooding more common in certain areas. It's a complex phenomenon, but we know that when we cut off trees, basically the top layer of the soil can also be eliminated. Soil erosion takes place, and that is increasing the risk of flooding. Plus, don't forget the fact that the roots of the plants and the undergrowth vegetation is also something that prevents soil erosion. So, in one way or another, you should write down these kind of things in here. For example, soil erosion can be prevented by the plant roots and vegetation of the undergrowth. This is what is given in the key as well. There are also numerous fungus species living in pine forests. Some of them are parasites, while others live in symbiosis with pine trees. Explain the difference between the two types of interactions. Alright, so that's an easy one. In case of symbiosis, both of the organisms are benefiting from the interaction. But in case of parasitism, basically the parasite is benefiting, but the host is harmed as a result of the interaction. So let's see how does it look like when we write it down. Symbiosis, both species benefit from the interaction. In parasitism, parasite benefits, host is harmed in the interaction. Moving on to the second exercise, sprout and mold. After keeping a slice of bread in a nylon bag for a few days, you can see that it goes moldy. Examining a small piece of what has formed on the surface of the bread under a microscope, you can see the following image. What is the characteristic of this living organism? Write the letter of the correct answer in the box. Let's look at the options. This is a bacterium species. It cannot be the good answer, as we know mold is a fungus. This is a penicillium species. Now, if the mold in the picture was penicillium, we would see brush-like structures with a conidia on the top, instead of these drop-shaped structures that we can actually see. This is a fungus species. That is probably the good answer. This is an autotrophic species. We know fungi are heterotrophs. This is a parasitic species. Again, that's something which is not true, so the good answer is going to be C. The participants of a friendly discussion also noticed that the grape berries and peanuts to be offered over the table also went moldy. Explain why it would have been dangerous to eat these food items. So we know molds can produce toxins which can be dangerous for living organisms. Basically, we can call them mycotoxins, and that's the answer you need to write down here. Luckily, they had fresh grapes and peanuts in store in the kitchen. The grape berries are the fruits of the plants, while the peanuts we eat are the seeds. Compare the seeds and the fruits of plants. Write the correct letter in the box next to each statement. Typical of gymnosperms, out of these options, only A can come in here. Don't forget that angiosperms are the ones that form fruits. It contains the embryo plant. That's going to be true for both the seed and the fruit. Each vascular plant germinates from it. This is an interesting one. Don't forget that ferns are also vascular but non-flowering plants, and they have totally different life cycle. So basically D comes here. During evolution, it helped the plants to adapt to life on land. Again, that's something which is true for both. It is the result of asexual reproduction. Asexual, pay attention, that's gonna be D again. It can contain food storage, that's true for both. Okay. Important constituents of the healthy diet are the different sprouts, since they are rich in minerals, vitamins, enzymes, and antioxidants. They promote the absorption of food molecules and the elimination of waste from the body. You can have your own homemade sprouts by germinating your own seeds, and that is what the children, Kata, Jócsi, Peti, and Laci, decided to do. They examined the germination of lentil seeds of the same origin under different conditions. Kata placed the lentil seeds on wet cotton wool in a glass platelet and put it all into the fridge to stop the molds growing on it. Jócsi also placed the lentil seeds on wet cotton wool in a glass platelet but left in the room. Paddy got it all done in a rush by throwing the seeds into the glass platelet which was left in the room. Laci put the seeds on wet cotton wool in a small bottle, and before leaving it in the room he closed the bottle full of seeds with a plastic top tightly to make sure that the seeds are not thrown out of the bottle. Only Jócsi's seeds germinated in a couple of days, but no germination started in the other 3 cases. As it is known, in order for germination to take place, there are several conditions to be met. Due to the lack of which condition the seeds did not germinate in each of the following cases, write the conditions which was not met next to the names of the experimenting kids. Okay, so in case of Kata, what happened is that basically she put the germinating seeds into the fridge, so the temperature was not suitable. We know that all seeds need water, oxygen, and suitable temperature in order to germinate. So in case of Kata, the temperature was the problem. For Patty, got it all done, throwing the seeds into the glass platelet which was left in the room. Obviously no water was applied, so the moisture was missing. And then in case of Laci, the problem was the lack of oxygen. Okay, so the good answers are these. Exercise 3 is about birds. Name 2 characteristic features visible in the diagram which have evolved during evolution as an adaptation for flight in birds. So you just needed to look at this picture and choose 2 characteristic features. I decided to mention the streamlined body, as you can see it clearly in this picture. And don't forget that it is helping them to reduce the air resistance, so it helps them to fly. And the other characteristic feature is this extension of the sternum, which is called a keel. So the keel-shaped sternum is mentioned in here. Muscles can attach to this sternum, and those muscles actually help them to fly, to move the wings. Okay, in the key you can read some other solutions that would also be accepted. Which of the following statements is true for the reproduction of birds? They have external fertilization. That's definitely something which is not true. They have internal. The zygote receives its nourishment through the placenta. That's not true for birds. This is true for placental mammals. The eggs are hatched by the warmth of the sun. Luckily, birds are warm-blooded animals, so they use their own body heat to hatch the eggs. So again, that's something which is not true. The zygote is surrounded by yolk rich in nutrients. That is going to be true for the amniotic eggs. And the last one, the majority of the birds are hermaphrodites. They are of separate sexes. So again, this is something which is not correct. D comes here. Which 2 of the following statements are true for the circulatory system of birds? Write the letters of the correct answers into the boxes. Okay, in order to answer this question, I hope you remember what you have learned about the circulation of birds. They have double circulation, and the septum is separating the ventricles totally. So they have 4 distinct chambers in their hearts. So let's look at the statements. All their arteries carry oxygenated blood and their veins carry blood rich in carbon dioxide. Okay, that's not how we distinguish in between arteries and veins. Arteries are going away from the heart, veins are going towards the heart, but they can transfer both deoxygenated and oxygenated blood. They have a single circulatory system. That would be true for fish, but from reptiles we are talking about, from amphibians we are talking about double circulation, and birds do have double circulation as well, so again, an X comes here. The partition, which is called a septum, between the right and the left ventricles in their heart is not complete. We have just discussed that they do have a complete separation. We know that in case of reptiles, the septum is not totally separating. And in case of amphibians, actually, they have 3 chambers. Oxygen binds to hemoglobin in their blood. That is definitely true. They have a closed circulatory system. That's also true. So D and E come here. The double ventilation of birds is connected to the energy demand of flight. Fill in the gaps of the following text with the suitable words. So, double ventilation. Some of the air is drawn directly into the lungs during inspiration in birds. The rest of the air flows into the air sacs, from which the air leaves the body through the lungs during expiration. The gas exchange in the lungs takes place over the surface of the parabronchi, or you can simply say air tubules. Similarly to the human body, the oxygen molecules getting into the blood are transported to the skeletal muscle fibers by the red blood cells. Within the muscle fibers, the oxygen is used up in the process of biological oxidation taking place in the cellular organelles called mitochondrium. Flying is also assisted by feathers. Name 2 other functions in which feathers can play a role in the life of birds. We know feathers can be of several kinds. We discussed in details the down feathers, body feathers, flight feathers. And these feather types can have different functions, but here you just need to name 2 functions in general. So, heat insulation and waterproofing. Exercise 4, marriages. A man had a son from his first marriage, indicated by S in the family tree. After the death of his wife, he got married again and had a daughter from his second marriage, indicated by D in the family tree. The man had blood group O, while his first wife had blood group B and his second wife had blood group AB. After studying the family tree, write the correct letter in the box next to each statement. So let's see what we know from the text. This man has blood group O. The first wife had blood group B and the second wife had blood group AB. Okay, so these are the phenotypes. The genotypes are the following. And this can be either heterozygous or this. And then the offsprings, if we cross these together, this son can either have type B blood or 0, and this daughter can have A or B. Let's look at the statements. The Y chromosome was inherited from his or her father. Y chromosome is only present in case of boys. Therefore, A is the good answer, which is basically true only for the son. The genes linked to the X chromosome can only come from his or her biological mother. Again, that's something which is true for the boy, because the Y is coming from the dad, so the X must come from the mom. It is possible that he or she has the same blood group as his or her biological mother. Okay, so we have discussed that the son can have the same blood group as the mother, but this daughter can't have type AB blood. Therefore, again, A is the good answer. It is possible that he or she has the same blood group as his or her father. Again, the son will be the good answer in here, as we discussed that blood group O is a possibility, and the father had blood group O as well, we know. So A. Each of his or her somatic cell contains 23 chromosomes. Okay, somatic cells contain 23 pairs of chromosomes or 46 chromosomes, so that's gonna be true for neither of them. He or she must carry a recessive allele of the ABO blood group system. That's true for both. His or her mitochondria originate from his or her biological mother. Again, that's gonna be true for both. We know that mitochondrial DNA is inherited from our mom. What decides the blood group system of the child born in the second marriage? What are the probabilities expressed in percentages of the various blood group phenotypes? Include the words egg cell, sperm cell, and allele in your reasoning. Okay, in order to answer this question, it always helps you if you draw the Punnett square. So quickly we do the cross. You need to observe the second marriage. So the dad is blood type O, the mom is blood type AB. So we can see that there is going to be a 50% chance of having type A or type B daughter. So we answered the second part of the exercise, which was about the percentages. Let's move on to the first one. What decides the blood group system of the child born in the second marriage? Knowing the inheritance pattern of the ABO blood group system, definitely the allele which is present in the egg cell of the mom will determine the blood group type of the daughter, as the father can only donate these recessive alleles in the sperm cell. So that's what we need to write down here. Okay. I hope you can read it better than my handwriting. Okay, moving on to the fifth exercise. Physiological states in different situations. In this task, we are concerned about the changes taking place in the bodies of two students who are involved in distinctly different activities. The first student is having a rest while lying on his bed 1 or 2 hours after a substantial lunch. In contrast, the second student is sitting in a language exam center waiting excitedly for his exam to start. Compare the changes taking place in the organisms of the two students. Write the correct letters in the boxes next to the statements. In the present exercise, you have to remember what you have learned about the autonomic nervous system, more specifically about the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. The first student is showing a typical case of resting and digesting processes when the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, and the second student is in a stressful situation, unfortunately. So in his case, the sympathetic nervous system is the active one. Okay, so let's look at the statements. In the present situation, the rate of his breathing is increasing. That's typical for the second student, which is going to be B. What is happening? B, okay. As I have mentioned before, the sympathetic nervous system is causing this change. The adrenaline concentration in his blood has increased. That's also something which is going to be true for the second student. We know adrenaline, often called as the stress hormone, and it is released in stressful situations. The heart rate of student is lower now than it was in the preceding time period. Obviously, that's going to be true for the first student. Resting and digesting process is taking place. The blood supply of the student's digestive tract is increasing. That's again true for the first student. Hormonal regulation plays a part in bringing about the state. That's true for both of the students. And the pulse rate of the student has not changed compared to the preceding time period. That's definitely D, neither of them. One of them has increased, the other one has decreased, so D is the good answer. How did the blood supply of the skeletal muscle in the second student change compared to the resting state? As a result of the activity of the sympathetic system, the blood vessels in the skin or in the digestive system, for example, will constrict, while the skeletal muscle blood vessels will expand. So, to answer the question, you can simply write down that the skeletal muscle blood supply increased. Name the division of the autonomic nervous system that became activated in the organism of the second student. We have discussed it many times. That's the sympathetic nervous system. Name the endocrine gland whose increased activity is responsible for the increasing production of adrenaline. That's going to be part of an adrenal gland, namely the adrenal medulla. Okay. Moving on to the sixth exercise. Stretch out your arms. Australian surgeons managed to transform the damaged nerves through surgical intervention and thereby restore the ability of paralyzed patients to move their arms and hands. Scientific advancement moved one step closer to improving the quality of life of those who survived accidents involving spinal cord damages. The patients involved in the study suffered from quadriplegia, the paralysis of both arms and legs as a result of accidents. However, they were still able to move some of the muscles of their upper arms, therefore it became possible to have other muscles of the arm and hand working by transplanting the undamaged intact nerves. Some of the upper arm nerves were cut and connected to lower arm nerves responsible for flinging their arms open and clenching and opening their fists. As a result, the patients undergoing surgery regained their ability to stretch out their arms, grab something, and lift it. I'm able to cut up my meal, use normal cutlery, and I can write with my own hand at university, said one of the patients. In which part of the spinal cord can the cell bodies of nerve cells be found that are responsible for moving the muscles of the arm? Give the exact name of the part and its appropriate letter in the diagram. So we have analyzed this figure so many times when we were talking about the hand withdrawal reflex or the knee jerk reflex. And if you remember, we said that the motor pathway is actually leaving from the ventral horn of the gray matter. And you can see actually here the nerve cell body of a motor neuron. So that's what you need to write down in here, ventral horn of the gray matter. As for the letter, you can write either I or H. I just put here I. That's more obvious for me, but age would also be accepted. Name the part of the cerebral cortex from which the descending motor pathways involved in executing the voluntary movement of the arms and hands originate. The motor areas of the cerebral cortex are responsible for our voluntary movements, for example. When we covered this topic, we mentioned the primary motor area, which is located in the frontal lobe, and that's the important piece of information. Actually, it's in the posterior part of it. What determines the extent to which a patient injured in an accident is paralyzed? Write the letters of the correct answers in the boxes. So, the extent of paralysis is determined by heritable traits. That can be crossed out. Definitely, it's not correct. Damage to only the dorsal ascending tracts of white matter of the spinal cord will result in a loss of sensation. That is going to be one of the good answers. We know that sensory neurons of the receptors are there. Damage only to the white matter of the spinal cord cannot result in the paralysis of all four limbs. That's not true. It is determined by whether only the spinal cord was damaged or the cranial nerves as well. Again, this is not correct. If the damage occurs high up along the cervical and upper thoracic region of the spinal cord, the arms and hands can be affected as well. This is going to be the other correct statement. So B and E. Give the name of the muscle related to its function which contracts when the arm is in the position shown in the picture. Provide also the letter indicating this muscle. Name the muscle related to its function. So that's a flexor muscle, and we are talking about the biceps in here, and the letter will be A. So flexor muscle, and I just write A in here. What is happening to the other muscle in the same position shown in the picture? So these are antagonistic muscles, the biceps and the triceps. So the triceps will relax. That's what we need to put in here. So it is relaxing. Okay. Name the part of the picture marked by a letter which is not made up of muscle tissue. This question is asking us to name letter C, which is going to be a tendon. You know, tendons are connecting muscles to bones. And basically, I have answered the seventh question. What is the biological function of the part named in the former question? Moving on to exercise 7, African swine fever. White boars in search of meat dig the soft soil with their flat, disc-shaped snout. One of their main food sources is the earthworm. In the meantime, they also pick up free riders such as the larvae of lungworms, which develop in the soil-dwelling worms and then wait for the ideal host. After the white boar finishes its meal, the larvae find their way along the circulatory system to the lungs. Once in the lungs, they settle and develop in the bronchi, causing inflammation and bleeding. The eggs of the worms leave the white boar's body to be eaten by earthworms, and the circle is closed. The diseased white boars, due to their weakened respiratory organs, fall victims more easily to other pathogens such as the African swine fever virus. The virus originates from Africa, where it is transmitted from one animal to another by argosy ticks, the relative of ticks, which sucking blood from the animals. In Europe, the spread of virus is mostly attributed to human activities. Describe the route the larvae of the lungworm that enter the whiteboard's body takes from the small intestine after leaving the liver all the way to the bronchi. Choose the names of the blood vessels and parts of the heart from the names listed below and write them in the empty boxes in the correct order. The circulatory system of the whiteboard is similar to that of a human. Okay, so we need to find the way how the larvae can reach the lungs from the liver. Out of these parts, the hepatic vein will come to the first box. Then the vena cava is going to be in the second one. The vena cava transport blood towards the right atrium. From the right atrium, it will be pumped to the right ventricle, from where the blood will be transported towards the lungs throughout the pulmonary artery. So that's going to be the correct way of putting these expressions after each other. Based on the excerpt and the pictures provided, write the numbers of the statements into the appropriate parts of the Venn diagram. If the statement does not refer to any of the species, write its number outside the oval shapes. You can see here the organisms. And let's move on to the second statement. Its cells contain DNA. All right, so this is a virus, therefore number 2 comes here. Its hereditary material is nucleic acid. That's true for all. Its proteins, typical of the species, are made on its own ribosomes. Ribosomes are only present in case of the tick and the lungworm. So number 4 comes to the same intersection. 5. It is one of the regulators of the European whiteboard population. It is written down in here, basically in the text. So the African swine fever virus and the lungworm. These are the regulators, therefore number 5 belongs to this part. 6. It belongs to the group of insects. Okay, none of them, because this is an arthropod, but it's not an insect. Part of its life cycle takes place within the body of another organism. That's going to be true for the virus and the lungworm. So 7 comes here. It is a prokaryotic organism. We don't have a bacterial cell in here, so number 8 is going to be outside. Okay, 9. It is a parasitic organism. It's true for all. It is an arthropod involved in the spreading of the African swine fever virus in Africa. It is also written down in the text nicely in here, in this part. So number 10 comes to this part. Okay. So let's do the last exercise, mouthful of bread. The picture captures the moment right before swallowing a piece of bread and butter. Name the parts indicated by letters in the diagram. So let's observe this little figure in here. A is showing us the pharynx. B is indicating the epiglottis or the larynx, can also be written in here. C is clearly indicating the esophagus, and D is the trachea. The bread contains, among others, flour, whereas the butter comprises proteins and oils. Which one of these start to be digested by the saliva in the mouth cavity of an adult person? We know salivary amylase is breaking down starch into disaccharides, and out of these 3 options, obviously starch will be broken down, which is present in the flour, so the breakdown of starch molecules into disaccharides, maltose. So many things can be mentioned in here, but we need to pick 2. So I wrote saliva lubricates food, makes swallowing easier because it makes food slippery, and it also helps to equalize the pH conditions. But if you check the key, you can see that other answers are also accepted, like it helps us to equalize the temperature, it is also destroying bacteria and other pathogens, it forms a protective layer on the teeth, so all of these would be accepted. When trying to speak while swallowing, the food sometimes goes down the wrong way, causing you to have coughing attack. Explain what triggers coughing, which muscles are involved in executing it. So whenever we are coughing, the abdominal muscles have the major role in the process, and the agent that is triggering this coughing is the bolus, is the food that actually went down the wrong way. So the bolus, which entered the trachea, is triggering the coughing. Abdominal muscles help to force food out from the windpipe, so from the trachea. Okay, that was it. I hope it was helpful. Should you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, and I wish you the best of good luck.